Chapter 1131. At Prince Heng's residence, Zhao Zheng had vented his anger for a while before he gradually calmed down. He had to remain calm. This was a crucial moment and not the time to be impulsive. He had already lost too much to Zhao Yi. Once he left the capital, Zhao Yi would be in charge and he would have nothing to do with the court. They had poached the Minister of Revenue and other officials from him in a short period of time. It was equivalent to cutting off his limbs and controlling most of the court. Now, they wanted to use this method to make him leave the capital. How could he fall for such a sinister trick? How could he dare to fall for it? If he stepped out of this place he would not be able to come back. Zhao Zheng lifted a chair and sat on it. He said in a deep voice, "I cannot leave." Fang Yu stood in the hall and looked at Zhao Zheng. He thought for a moment and said, "Prince Heng is right. You cannot leave the capital." Zhao Zheng said slowly, "But I have to answer to father and the court officials. Leave this matter to us." Fang Yu thought for a moment and a trace of determination appeared on his face. It did not take long for the chaos caused by the holy religion to be quelled. The crown prince was still preparing for his journey in the capital. He had only issued an order for the garrison in Huizhou to eliminate the bandits of the holy religion. Unexpectedly, the holy religion was much easier to deal with than they had imagined. It did not take much effort for the garrison in Huizhou to destroy the branch of the holy religion in Huizhou. They captured more than 100 bandits of the holy religion and escorted them all the way to the capital. The news of victory arrived in less than 2 days. The chaos in Huizhou had been resolved without the crown prince's presence. This was the greatest victory that the court had achieved in the battle against the holy religion. His Majesty was very pleased. He rewarded the crown prince and delegated more power to him. For a time, the crown prince and the third prince reached a delicate balance in the court. King Feng's residence. Zhao Xuanhuan let out a long sigh and said, "I didn't expect the holy religion to be so decisive." They didn't hesitate to sacrifice a branch of the holy religion to help the crown prince stabilize the situation. All our previous efforts have been in vain. At the very least, the strength of the holy religion has been weakened. I don't believe that they would destroy their own foundation for the sake of the crown prince. Yes, I want to see how many arms they can break. Other than Huizhou, there are still more than a dozen prefectures in the capital region. They like to kill each other, so let them take their time. Fortune God Qian was deep in thought. He did not say anything from the beginning until the end. After an hour he left King Feng's mansion. In the Qian mansion, Qian Duo was sitting in the room and counting the banknotes in boredom. The god of fortune Qian pushed the door open and entered. Qian Duo looked up and put away the banknotes. Money god of fortune walked to his side and asked, "What else did he say to you?" Qian Duo was stunned and asked, "Who?" "The person you met in Liuzhou." "Who?" Money god of fortune Qian looked at him and said, "A few days ago my father met a few senior monks. I heard that the Dharma is profound. Be careful of the Taoist nuns." Money god of fortune Qian looked at him and asked, "What Taoist nuns?" "The empress of the holy religion. Don't underestimate the holy religion. They have a big plan. They don't sincerely support the crown prince. The crown prince is at most a puppet. Don't push them to the extreme or something terrible will happen." Money god of fortune Qian thought about it and said, "Pack your things now and go back to Fengzhou with your mother." Money god of fortune Qian kicked his butt. "What up? Hurry up." Zhao Zheng was very happy. In the battle with Zhao Yi he had the upper hand several times, which was rare. The holy religion kept rebelling, and he kept sending people to suppress the rebellion. He won 3 battles, and his father was very satisfied with what he had done these days. The court also praised him more than before. He looked at Fang Yu and said with a smile, "Envoy Fang, how about you sacrifice a few more prefectures? I promise that as long as I can be promoted I can compensate you for what you have lost now." Fang Yu smiled and said, "For the great cause of your highness, what's the harm of sacrificing a few more prefectures?" Zhao Zheng was overjoyed. "Then it's a deal. This time I will go in person." Fang Yu agreed with a smile on his face. It was not until he walked out of Prince Heng's mansion that his face became completely gloomy. He walked through several streets and came to a yard. After knocking on the door and entering, he bowed and said, "Your Highness, these days the holy religion's strength in the capital region has been greatly damaged. Zhao Zheng's request is a bit too much." A voice came from the darkness. "It's not time for the emperor of the Qi kingdom to die yet." Fang Yu thought for a moment and said in a low voice, "But Your Highness, it wasn't easy for us to infiltrate the officials. After being framed and instigated by the third prince, Zhao Zheng no longer trusts them. If the holy religion's strength continues to weaken, Even if Zhao Zheng becomes the emperor, it will do us more harm than good. Fang Yu's face was gloomy. He said, "We must let him know that without the holy religion, he is nothing." The other side was silent for a long time before a voice came again. "Then let the third prince benefit first." Fang Yu looked up. "Your Highness, what do you mean?" "That person should also die." The Qi kingdom was different from other countries. Just because the crown prince was the crown prince didn't mean that he would really sit on the throne. Everything depended on the emperor's final edict. His Majesty's attitude toward the crown prince was vague. His attitude toward the third prince was also vague. This caused the court to be divided into three factions. The crown prince's faction, the third prince's faction, and the soy sauce faction. During this time, the crown prince, who had been gloomy for a long time, began to shine. His performance in eliminating the rebels of the holy religion was remarkable. He even showed signs of returning to the court. This time, in order to boost morale and dampen the arrogance of the holy religion, the crown prince had personally gone to the capital region to eliminate the rebels of the holy religion. When he returned, his reputation in the capital would definitely rise to a higher level. Of course, the premise was that there were no unexpected situations. For example, the crown prince died while eliminating the rebels. Or, after the crown prince left the capital, His Majesty suddenly died, and the third prince smoothly took over the imperial army and entered the palace. Or the third prince directly rebelled and forced the emperor to abdicate the throne. Of course, the crown prince had many guards around him. His Majesty's health was not at its end yet. It was even more impossible for the third prince to take the opportunity to rebel. These were all unlikely events. Victory State. A few carriages slowly entered the city gate. Lin Yong opened the curtain and said to Lin Wanru, "Miss, I heard that the holy religion is wreaking havoc here. Why don't we return to the capital first?" Lin Wanru thought for a moment and said, "Let's wait and see first. It's the last state anyway, all right." Lin Yong replied and said, "Then I'll find a place to rest first." Lu State. Ruoqing had given birth 2 days ago. Both mother and child were safe. Other than his younger sister, Li Duan had another younger brother. Li Yi had also received a letter from Su a few days ago. He and Elder Tian were already on their way and would arrive in a few days. At this time it was the 28th year of Xuanhuan, the 5th month of the Qi kingdom. The first prince had eliminated the rebels of the holy religion in the capital region and his reputation was growing day by day. The third prince temporarily took over the reins and established his authority in the imperial court. In the depths of the palace, the emperor of the Qi kingdom had just taken his medicine and was sleeping soundly in his chambers. An hour later, a bell suddenly rang in the middle of the night. On the 13th day of the 5th month, the 28th year of the Qi kingdom, the emperor passed away in Wanhua Hall. Overnight, the entire capital was shocked. Chapter 1132. His Majesty's stubborn illness had not been cured, and the two princes fought fiercely for the throne. In order to fight for the supreme position, the eldest prince and the third prince should have used all kinds of means and resorted to all kinds of means. The fight for the throne had always been like this, and this was what the eldest prince and the third prince had done. However, no one expected that the former emperor would pass away in the palace in the evening after announcing a series of decrees in high spirits during the morning court session yesterday. There was no precaution. There was no edict of succession. The crown prince was not in the capital. Although the position of the crown prince of the Qi kingdom was not as stable as that of the neighboring countries, the crown prince was the nominal heir to the throne. When the former emperor suddenly passed away and there was no succession, it was reasonable for the crown prince to inherit the throne. This was the ancestral system. However, the crown prince was not in the capital at such a critical moment. The third prince was in the capital. The third prince, who had already grown his wings in the court, would definitely die if the crown prince succeeded the throne. There was no doubt about it. It was the same the other way around. It was already late at night and most of the people in the capital had fallen asleep. However, when the bell that represented the death of the emperor rang in the palace, everyone from the dignitaries to the common people was awakened from their sleep. Fortune god Chen hurriedly put on his clothes. He did not even have time to button them up before he ran to the door and shouted, "Quick, prepare the carriage. We're going to King Feng's mansion." At this time, the sedan chair of Minister of Revenue Cui Jiang had already stopped in front of King Feng's mansion. When fortune god Chen arrived at the gate of King Feng's mansion, there were already more than 10 sedan chairs parked on both sides. "Your Highness, you should restrain your grief and focus on the overall situation. This is a great opportunity for us. Your Highness, please give the order." When fortune god Qian walked into King Feng's mansion, the third prince was already surrounded by people. They all looked excited and kept urging him. Soon after, countless figures hurried out of King Feng's mansion and disappeared in different directions. The emperor had passed away, and the crown prince had left the capital. Only the third prince could take charge of the situation. On the night of the former emperor's death, the third prince went to the palace to make arrangements. On the second day, all the officials gathered in front of the palace gate. The minister of state took out a posthumous edict and read it in front of everyone. It was an edict of succession. The imperial edict stated that the crown prince, Zhao Zheng, did not cultivate virtue and conduct, and that he was disloyal and disloyal. For the sake of the people of the Qi kingdom and the people of the world, the late emperor had deposed the crown prince, Zhao Zheng, and passed the throne to the third prince, Zhao Yi. Most people were skeptical about the authenticity of the edict. Before the crown prince left the capital, the emperor had greatly praised him. After a few days, how could such a posthumous edict appear? But that was then and this was now. The capital was firmly under the third prince's control, and many of the ministers of the court respected him as their master. Even those officials loyal to the crown prince did not dare to step forward. The crown prince had left the capital at this crucial moment, and the third prince had taken advantage of this opening to enter. These people were like clay bodhisattvas crossing the river, powerless to protect themselves. The former emperor had just passed away, and the third prince could not succeed the throne immediately. But with the edict of succession, he had obtained the military seal, which was enough to command the 50,000 imperial guards in the capital. Moreover, there were too many ministers loyal to him in the court. In a short night, he had gained control of the entire capital. The capital, which had been treacherous for several years, seemed to have ended all the chaos in the blink of an eye, and the dust had settled. In Shung province, several hundred li away from the capital, the crown prince, who had just wiped out the rebels of the holy religion, was riding on his horse in high spirits. When he received an urgent report from the front, his face instantly turned pale, his body swayed and he fell off his horse. The guards on his left and right hurriedly helped him up and shouted, "Imperial physician, summon the imperial physician." Fang Yu stepped forward and pinched Zhao Zheng's philtrum. Not long after, he coughed heavily and woke up. Zhao Zheng's face was ashen and he kept muttering, "It's over, it's over, it's all over." He had never imagined that his father would suddenly pass away when he was leaving the capital. Zhao Yi had already gained control of the situation in the capital. Everything he had done, everything he had fantasized about, and the throne that he had coveted for a long time, had all become bubbles. Fang Yu shook him heavily and said, "Your Highness, you can't give up." Zhao Zheng looked at him and smiled bitterly. "Zhao Yi must have controlled the imperial guards in the capital now. What can I use to fight against him? What can I use to fight against him?" Bah! Fang Yu slapped him across the face. Zhao Zheng was stunned as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The third prince only controls the capital, and only controls 50,000 imperial guards. Fang Yu looked at him and said angrily, "You are the crown prince and the throne should have been yours. He is just a traitor, a traitor. There are 50,000 imperial guards in the capital, but outside the capital, there are another 150,000 soldiers. How did you lose?" Zhao Zheng was stunned for a moment and then he finally understood. There were 200,000 soldiers stationed in the capital, and only 50,000 of them were in the capital. The other 150,000 were scattered in the various provinces of the capital. After his father passed away, his people rushed over. Zhao Zheng's reaction was definitely not as fast as theirs. If he could control all the soldiers in the capital, 150,000 against 50,000, and with the help of the holy religion, how could he not conquer the capital? He immediately took out a token from his waist and stuffed it into Fang Yu's hands, saying, "Envoy Fang, hurry, hurry. We must hurry before that traitor." "Rest assured, Your Highness." Fang Yu took the token and turned around to leave. After walking a dozen steps, a cold smile appeared on his face. The capital must be conquered. At that time there would be no need for Zhao Zheng to exist. The Empress's plan was much simpler than directly helping Zhao Zheng to the throne. The disaster of war had erupted abruptly, and with the death of Emperor Xian, the third prince had seized the opportunity to ascend to the throne, taking control of the 50,000 imperial army in the capital. Meanwhile, the first prince had gathered more than 100,000 soldiers outside the capital and was directing his vanguard at the capital. Although the third prince was in an important area of the capital, his retreat had been cut off. Faced with an army more than twice his size, he could only rely on the walls to barely hold out. If not for the fact that the capital was heavily stocked with provisions, He would not have been able to hold out for long. The capital region, which had always been peaceful, became a land of war in a short period of time. Although the first prince's army did not massacre the people like the foreign invaders, it was not uncommon for them to forcibly take food and fodder and forcibly conscript the people. The entire capital region was in a state of panic. In Victory Province, a purple-clothed man walked into a camp and bowed. Reporting to Protector, several armies have fallen under our control. Zhao Zheng is no longer of much use to us. Why don't we? Fang Yu waved his hand and said, No, no, no. On the surface, we still need His Highness the Crown Prince as our cover. Otherwise we'll have no justifiable reason to attack. Even though the holy religion had been operating in the Qi Kingdom for more than 20 years and had reached its peak after Zhao Zheng had delegated power to it, without Zhao Zheng, they were just like the third prince, rebels. With Zhao Zheng they were the masters of justice. As for whether the crown prince would die of an illness after conquering the capital, fall to his death on a horse, choked to death while eating, only the heavens could predict this. Fang Yu looked outside the tent and sighed. He muttered, if there's a divine punishment, how hard can it be to conquer a city? The capital. All the city gates in the north, south, east, and west had been closed. The drawbridge by the moat had been raised, and the entire capital was on high alert. King Feng Zhaoyi had taken over the capital, but he had not moved into the imperial palace. In King Feng's residence, the officials and strategists looked gloomy. No one had expected the first prince to move so quickly. In such a short time, he had gained control of most of the military forces in the capital region and surrounded the capital. Although they had more than twice the number of soldiers, they still could not conquer the capital. However, the capital was isolated and without reinforcements. If they continued to waste time like this, the city would be exhausted one day if reinforcements did not arrive. Now that he thought about it, the crown prince had left the capital, His Majesty had passed away, and the crown prince had led troops to surround the city. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands messing around with the whole thing. When Li Yi received the news, he was also stunned for a long time before he recovered. The emperor of the Qi kingdom had passed away. Zhao Yi had taken control of the capital, but he was surrounded. It could be said that the first prince had benefited from the disaster. He had only temporarily lost the throne. When Zhao Yi was exhausted, he would return to the throne sooner or later. Of course, this was what others had predicted. Li Yi had a rough idea of what Taoist Nun wanted. They wanted the entire Qi kingdom. Zhao Zheng and Zhao Yi were their pawns. They might not be smart, but their influence was too great. A grandmaster had abandoned martial arts and started a cult for more than 20 years. No one knew to what extent they had infiltrated the Qi kingdom. If that was the case, perhaps Zhao Yi had forced them into a corner, and that was why they had pushed the Qi kingdom into chaos. Why did Zhao Yi have to force the other party to such an extent? She was committing a sin. Chapter 1133. Li Yi thought for a long time about how Zhao Yi had forced Zhao Zheng into a dead end, causing Taoist Nun to turn hostile and gather 150,000 soldiers to besiege the capital. Since she could not conquer the capital, she planned to exhaust him to death. He had to take the blame for this. After all, he was a man who valued his reputation and would never shirk his responsibilities. He was the one who taught Chen Duoduo the stratagem of sowing discord and borrowing a knife. These stratagems had been tested countless times in history. If one didn't work, he would change to another. There was bound to be a trick that worked for Zhao Zheng. And things went smoother than he had imagined. Zhao Zheng did not refuse any of these tricks and took them all. As a result, his subordinates all ran away with Zhao Yi. The holy religion did not provoke anyone, but it also suffered an unexpected disaster. Its branches in several provinces had no choice but to walk into the trap. If Li Yi were Taoist Nun, he would not have tolerated it either. But this was not his original intention. He just wanted to repay Zhao Yi for taking care of the Lin family in Wanru for the past few years. He also taught Chen Duoduo some things in the hope that it would strengthen the strength of Zhao Yi's faction. But who would have thought that besides spending money, young Master Chen's ability to draw inferences from one instance was also beyond the reach of ordinary people. Zhao Yi had benefited a lot from the way of doing business. However, even Li Yi did not expect that Taoist Nun's influence in the capital of the Qi kingdom had already infiltrated the palace. She wanted the emperor of the Qi kingdom to die, and the emperor of the Qi kingdom would die at that time. They did not choose to help Zhao Zheng ascend the throne. Li Yi guessed that perhaps they also realized that if they helped him, the situation would be out of their control if Zhao Zheng fell out with them. Given the crown prince's character, it was not strange for him to burn the bridge after crossing the river. He first gave the capital to Zhao Yi, and in the blink of an eye, he used Zhao Zheng's name to gather more than 100,000 soldiers in the capital and surrounding the capital. Zhao Zheng was the crown prince and no one could change this. No matter how outstanding Zhao Yi was, he had to lower his head before him. The crown prince was not in the capital, and the third prince issued a fake imperial edict to send troops under the pretext of restoring order. Even the people of the Qi kingdom and the court could not refute it. Li Yi had always thought that Taoist nuns' IQ and EQ were only average, although she was skilled in martial arts, but he had to admit that her play was too beautiful. They were probably already in control of the more than 100,000 soldiers outside the capital. Once the capital was truly breached, Zhao Zheng's usefulness would end there. Li Yi felt a little guilty. Zhao Yi had helped him so much, and when he finally wanted to repay him, something like this had happened. This debt of gratitude was too unfair. He was not worried about Zhao Yi. They were not in dire straits even if they were surrounded by twice the number of soldiers. Since he had already received the news, the various prefectures of the Qi kingdom must have responded as well. Zhao Yi's reputation among the people was not for show. The provincial governor and governor of Liuzhou had already united the surrounding prefectures and were preparing to gather troops and head for the capital. He was worried about Lin Wanru. Her destination this time was the capital. When she sent the letter half a month ago, she had already arrived in the capital region. He did not know if she had reached the capital and what the situation there was now. She was accompanied by guards and several experts, enough to deal with most emergencies. But now that the Qi kingdom was in chaos, Li Yi still felt a little worried. With this thought in mind, he suddenly moved a few feet to the side, dodging a withered palm. An old voice came from behind him. "I haven't seen you for a year and everyone in your family is a monster, a monster." Su looked at him with an extremely shocked expression and smacked his lips, looking very hurt. As a grandmaster, his self-confidence had taken a huge hit when he failed to launch a sneak attack from the back. Li Yi thought to himself, are all grandmasters the same? Do they all like to sneak attack from behind? Fortunately, he had not stopped practicing during this period of time. The tortoise breathing skill had been running day and night. Although he still could not defeat Mississippi Lu, Bai Su could still suppress her with one hand. At this time, Bai Su could almost sweep the heaven list. Although he was still not a match for Mississippi Lu, he had vaguely touched a certain realm. It was even up to luck to see who would break through first. If he was a little luckier, then Rui would probably be the first to succumb to his despotic power. After successfully getting rid of the single relationship, Su actually did not look as sloppy as before. There were no oil stains on his clothes and his hair was tied up neatly. He did not look like he used to. Where's old man Chong? How dare he steal this old man's disciple? It's time to settle the score with him. If it was not for his temperament, Li Yi would definitely think that he had recognized the wrong person. Li Yi pointed to the courtyard next to him. Su stomped his feet and flew straight over the wall. After a while, there was a dull sound coming from the other side of the wall. Su and Taoist Nun were old enemies. He fought with Changde purely because he was itching to fight. There were not many people who could go all out with him. Chang was one of them. Moreover, the two of them had some old grudges. Because of Li Duan, there was a new grudge. This time it would not end so easily. You actually broke through too. This was Su's voice. What? You're allowed to break through? You're not allowed to break through? Changde's voice was always so gloomy. Su said sarcastically, how dare you call yourself an old man? You don't even have a dick. What right do you have to call yourself an old man? People always had to pay the price for their impulsiveness. Earlier, Elder Su was still able to fight evenly with Elder Chang. But now he quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Li Yi stood on top of the wall and saw that Elder Chang was attacking Elder Su's crotch with every move. If even one of Elder Chang's moves landed, the two of them would probably be brothers in the future. Li Yi watched from above and broke out in a cold sweat for Su. If Elder Tian had not joined the fight and forced Chang to retreat, Su would have been in danger today. If Chang had not been really angry, he and Su were actually about the same. However, he was definitely not a match for two grandmasters at the same time. Chang glanced at him disdainfully and said, you actually need a woman's help. Are you still worthy of being a grandmaster? What's wrong with my woman helping me? Su retorted fiercely. If you're so capable, find one too. Seeing the smile on Elder Tian's face, Li Yi knew that Su must have spent a lot of time studying the Mandarin duck handkerchief over the past year. When a person was shameless, he was invincible. While being shameless, he could also show off. With his current realm, he could finish his apprenticeship. Su and Elder Tian came to the Qi Kingdom to completely solve the problem of Taoist Nun. Although they did not include Rui, they had 3 grandmasters on their side. taking down Taoist Nun would not be a problem. However, the situation had changed. Even if they had 30 grandmasters, they would not be able to fight against an army of 150,000. It would be very difficult to take down Taoist Nun. With the help of Zhao Zheng, Taoist Nun had gathered 150,000 soldiers. Coupled with the original strength of the holy religion, it would not be easy to fight against them. However, the provinces of the Qi kingdom had already gathered their troops and rushed to the capital to rescue Zhao Yi. As long as Zhao Yi could hold on for a few months, the crisis would be resolved. In addition, Taoist Nun would also try her best to stop Zhao Yi's reinforcements. As long as they could take down Zhao Yi first, these people would not be a threat. When that time came, they could support Zhao Zheng to become a fake emperor. If they continued to raise their troops, it would be considered a rebellion. They would not be able to win the hearts of the people and would not last long. Li Yi confirmed this speculation the next day. The provinces of Jianghu were under martial law. Several important cities were not allowed to enter or leave. In order to resist the reinforcements from other provinces, the people of the provinces were also conscripted to different degrees. It was also at this time that Li Yi received a letter from Lin Yong. The first prince had sealed off the important cities in the capital region. No one was allowed to enter or leave. They were trapped in Xingzhou. Chapter 1134. The Qi kingdom had 13 prefectures in the capital region. There were more than 200,000 soldiers stationed in the capital region. Other than the 50,000 imperial guards guarding the capital, the rest of the soldiers were distributed in the prefectures. The capital region was the hinterland of the Qi kingdom and was responsible for the safety of the capital. The soldiers stationed in the capital region were only under the command of the emperor. Because these prefectures were too close to the capital and too sensitive, no one dared to attack them even when the crown prince and the third prince fought fiercely for power. After the death of the emperor, Zhao Zheng, as the crown prince, took control of the 150,000 soldiers in the capital region before the third prince, Zhao Yi. He besieged the capital and completely reversed the situation. The Xingzhou was one of the 13 prefectures in the capital region. After the incident in the capital region, the Xingzhou was sealed and it was difficult to enter or leave. During this period, riots broke out more than once and there were many refugees. Lin Wanru and her group were in danger. Lin Yong tried his best to send a message. She had guards with her who were all skilled and could overcome normal dangers and difficulties. However, the situation in the war zone was ever-changing and it was not a good place to stay for long. Li Yi sat in the yard and looked at the letter for a long time. Go. A gentle voice came from behind him. He turned his head and saw Rui walking over and sitting next to him. She said, Sister Wanru is in danger now. Every day that passes she will be in more danger. Don't hesitate anymore, husband. Li Yi's lips moved and she shook her head. Don't worry about this place, husband. With me here nothing will happen. Li Yi was silent for a long time. He put his arm around her waist and nodded. The Qi kingdom is in chaos and the Liuzhou is not a good place to stay. You should go back to the Xuzhou as soon as possible. I will pick up Wanru and go back immediately. It was not a good place to stay in the Qi kingdom. Rui escorted them from the Liuzhou route. They were accompanied by countless masters. On the way back, the branches of the holy religion had been subdued and there was almost no danger. Rui leaned on his shoulder and said, I will take care of everything here. I will leave Sister Wanru to you, husband. Hiss. Li sucked in a breath of cold air. If he wanted to talk, then talk nicely. Why did he have to twist his waist? The capital. The enemies outside the city had stopped attacking, but they did not retreat either. Instead, they set up camp outside the city. On the city wall, an imperial army general's expression darkened. Your Highness, they're trying to exhaust us to death. Zhao Yi was also clad in armor. He looked at the person beside him and asked, how long can the food stored in the city last? Minister of Revenue Cui Jiang looked outside the city and said, Your Highness, the national treasury has not been full in recent years. I have already sent people to check the major granaries in the city. If we save some, it will be enough to feed the entire city for half a year. If an ordinary city was besieged, the food in the city would be exhausted after a few months. The capital was far wealthier than ordinary cities, but the capital was densely populated, so food was naturally consumed much faster. Half a year. Zhao Yi stood on the city wall and looked into the distance. He murmured, half a year is enough. Within half a year, even the farthest Feng province would be able to send reinforcements. Victory Province. Located in the hinterland of the capital region and close to the capital, Victory Province was originally one of the top 10 wealthiest provinces in the Qi kingdom. However, since the death of the former emperor half a month ago, the crown prince, who was in Victory Province, took over Victory Province and transferred away the garrison troops. Victory Province had undergone earth-shattering changes. Many wealthy families had their properties confiscated, and their properties used to pay for the army. A large number of citizens had been conscripted to become live targets on the battlefield. On the streets of Xingzhou, it was rare to see shops open for business. Most of the people walking on the streets were women. Most of the provinces in the capital region were no different from Victory Province. Victory Province, Provincial Governor's Mansion. In the study, the young man raised his head and looked at a middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table. He said slowly, "Father, we've bet everything on the crown prince this time. If the crown prince fails, times have changed." The middle-aged man looked at him and said, "When the crown prince's troops came to Victory Province, if we didn't agree to his request, would we still be alive?" The young man hesitated for a moment and asked, "But if the third prince gets reinforcements, won't we?" 150,000 troops surrounding the city. The provincial governor of Victory Province shook his head and said, "Reinforcements won't be easy to wait for. I'm afraid they'll be exhausted to death in the capital before reinforcements arrive. The winner takes all. The crown prince has the third prince's throat in a chokehold. He needs to understand the situation." The young man nodded and said, "Father, I understand." Although they had almost submitted to the third prince, they couldn't go against the trend. The crown prince's military might was unstoppable. A wise man submits to circumstances. He walked out of the study and looked in a certain direction in the back residence. A smile appeared on his face and he strolled over. In a remote courtyard in the provincial governor's mansion of Victory Province, Lin Yong had a worried expression as he paced in the courtyard. Finally, he couldn't help but walk up to Lin Wanru and say, "Miss, that ma guy doesn't have good intentions. We can't stay here for long." Lin Wanru shook her head slightly and said, "I'm afraid we can't leave even if we want to now." She naturally knew that the son of the provincial governor of Victory Province didn't have good intentions. However, this was Victory Province, which was already under the control of the first prince. If they were to go out, they would have to face great danger. All of the Qian clan's businesses in Victory Province had already been taken over by the first prince. Presumably, the shops of the Lin family in the other provinces in the capital region wouldn't be spared either. Once their whereabouts were exposed, the first prince would definitely not let her, the person in charge of the Lin family, off. In order to protect her, the guards around her had already been scattered during the refugee tide when the government captured people to join the army. Only Lin Yong and a few others were left by her side. Xiu ran in from outside and said anxiously, "Miss, that ma guy is here again." When Lin Wanru stood up, the sound of footsteps could already be heard from the door. A young man walked in from outside. Looking at her, he said with a smile, "Is Miss Li used to living here?" Lin Wanru nodded and said, "Even if I'm not used to it, it's still much, much better than living outside. Thank you, young Master Ma, for saving me. There's no need to be so courteous between us." Young Master Ma waved his hand and said, "Miss Li, don't worry. In this provincial governor's residence, no one can harm you. If there's anything you need, just say the word. As long as I can do it, I'll do it for you." He smiled and said a few words. Then his tone suddenly changed as he asked, "I wonder if you've considered the matter that I mentioned to Miss Li yesterday?" Lin Wanru looked at him with a troubled expression. "Young Master Ma." The smile on young Master Ma's face faded slightly. Then he smiled again. Looking at her, he said, "When I first met Miss Li, I was shocked and thought that if I could tie the knot with Miss in this life, it would be a great blessing in my life. I'm sincere towards Miss and I hope that Miss can consider it seriously." Lin Wanru smiled apologetically and said, "Marriage is a big matter. It's decided by parents and the words of a matchmaker. How can I be so reckless?" Young Master Ma shook his head and said, "Times have changed. Now the Qi kingdom is in chaos. There are rebels everywhere. Even if I really wanted to invite Mrs. Parents over, not to mention the long journey, the many dangers along the way must not be taken lightly." Lin Wanru fell silent. Young Master Ma smiled and said, "Miss Li, don't be in a hurry to agree. If you don't agree today, I'll ask again tomorrow." This was a naked threat. Lin Yong's breathing was heavy. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to get angry when Lin Wanru suddenly stood up. She looked at young Master Ma and smiled. "It's not that I can't agree to it. In fact, it's not easy to be alone all these years. I've always wanted to find someone to rely on. However, for a woman, marriage is one of the most important things in life. It's already a pity that my parents can't come. But if I don't even inform them, it would be unfilial of me as a daughter. Please forgive me, young Master Ma. What's so difficult about that? Seeing that she had relented, young Master Ma waved his hand and said, Where are they now? I'll send someone to deliver a letter to them. It won't delay our wedding. Lin Wanru looked up at him and said, Lu Province. Chapter 1135. When the young master walked out of the small courtyard, there was a faint smile on his face. This girl called Li Ru still couldn't resist the charm of the young master of the provincial governor. Although he already had a few wives and concubines, and among them were young ladies from famous families, famous prostitutes from brothels and clean families, the moment he saw this Miss Li, he knew that she was different from those coquettish cheese who only knew how to fight for a man's favor. The unique temperament she had was something he had never seen before in his life. If he could hold such a girl in his arms, it would probably be the pinnacle of a man's life. He was already a little impatient and he couldn't help but quicken his steps. In the small courtyard, Lin Yong looked at Lin Wanru and said anxiously, Miss, how can you agree to that guy with the surname Ma? If you marry him, won't you not be able to marry the Li brothers? This time even Xiao couldn't stand it anymore. She glared at him and said, Are you stupid? Only when this letter is sent back will he know that we are in the provincial governor's manor. Otherwise, in this vast and chaotic Xing province, where will he go to find us? Lin Yong scratched his head and said worriedly, But what if we can't make it in time? We can only do this for now. Lin Wanru sighed. She had traveled all over these years and seen countless people. This young master of the provincial governor seemed to be modest on the surface, but he was actually ruthless on the inside. If she feigned civility with him and pretended to agree first, it would instead delay a little more. If she rejected him with an unyielding attitude, it would instead infuriate him even faster. She looked to the side and said, Xiao, go and get a brush and ink. Not long later Xiao came over with a brush and paper. She mumbled, Li, quickly come and save us. The young master held a letter in his hand and casually opened it. After reading it, he nodded in satisfaction. In the end, she didn't play any tricks. This letter was just an ordinary letter from home. The contents of the letter also said that she was about to get married and couldn't invite her parents over. It was an unfilial daughter, and so on. The young master read the letter several times and then put it back. He said to a servant, Send this letter to Liuzhou as soon as possible. Send my regards to my father-in-law and mother-in-law. Yes, young master. The servant answered, took the letter and quickly left. The young man walked to the side and impatiently asked an old man, It's been so long. Are you done with your divination? It's done, it's done. The old man closed the thick book in his hand and hurriedly said, Young master, I've already matched your and Miss Li's birthdays. The nearest auspicious day is 3 months later. 3 months? Hearing this, the young master frowned and said, 3 months is too long. Is there anyone closer? 1 month at most. I can't wait any longer. 1 month? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, 1 month, yes, but what? But it's not as auspicious as 3 months later. The young master waved his hand and said, Forget it. 1 month at most. Do as you see fit. If you do well, you'll be rewarded. If not? He coldly looked at the old man. The old man hurriedly said, There will be a good auspicious day in 28 days. Don't worry, young master. I'll arrange it properly for you. In the small courtyard, Xiao counted with her fingers. 28 days. It'll take about half a month to get to Liuzhou from here. If it's urgent, it must be urgent. In a house somewhere in Liuzhou. The two masters had been gone for several days. No one supervised his practice. Everyone was packing up. Li Duan walked back and forth in the yard looking a little bored. Even Li Mu was packing up his small bag. Li Duan had nothing to pack. After practicing for a while, he became even more bored. He looked in a certain direction, hesitated for a moment and then walked over. His aunt hadn't spanked him for a long time. Li Duan was a little less afraid of her. He walked over, looked up and asked in a low voice, Aunt, we're going back soon. Where are Dad and Master? Rui looked at him and said, They went to pick up Aunt Wanru. Li Duan asked Fang several times when he would call Aunt Lin mother, but Uncle Fang always said it was not the right time. Now they were going back. Dad should be picking up Aunt Wanru and going back together. He felt the time was right. Fang and his father left together. Li Duan had no one to ask, so he looked up at Mississippi Lu and asked, Aunt, now that Aunt Wanru is back, will I call her mother? Mississippi Lu raised her eyebrows, looked down at him and asked, Who told you? That's what Uncle Fang said. Li Duan thought for a moment and said, Uncle Fong used to say it was not the right time to call Aunt Wanru. Is it the right time now? I don't know. Mississippi Lu shook her head. Even she didn't hear the annoyance in her voice. Li Duan said, oh. Even his aunt didn't know. But even if his aunt didn't know Aunt Wanru, she should know herself, right? So he raised his head and asked again, then when is the right time for me to call her mother? Why don't I call her mother instead? He thought for a moment and added, if I call you mother, will you still spank me? My mother, second mother, and third mother don't spank me. When Li Duan realized that the atmosphere was not right, he turned around and ran outside. Every time he felt the temperature around his aunt start to turn cold, it meant that his butt was going to be in trouble. However, just like before, he still didn't run away. But there was something different this time. This time, when the slap landed on his butt, it didn't hurt, unlike when he was naughty and crying. Mississippi. Chapter 1136. The Qi Kingdom was once the most powerful country in this land. The country was prosperous and its people were at peace. The rivers were clear and the seas were calm. Its military prowess intimidated its neighbors. However, that was in the past. Several years ago, the Jing Kingdom rose at an unstoppable speed and left the surrounding countries far behind. The Qi Kingdom was prosperous and its people were at peace. The Qi Kingdom was at war. The glorious history of the Qi Kingdom became a thing of the past. Of course, that was only in comparison to the dazzling Jing Kingdom. In fact, other than being unable to catch up to the Jing Kingdom, the Qi Kingdom was still powerful. It was much more powerful than the Wu Kingdom and the Zhao Kingdom. However, even this had changed not long ago. The development of the entire matter could be said to be full of twists and turns. The emperor suddenly passed away. The crown prince happened to be away from the capital. The third prince took the opportunity to launch a coup and seize the capital. Then the crown prince came back from the brink of death. In an extremely short period of time, he took control of all the military forces in the capital region. He was in a stalemate with the third prince for more than a month now. In order to conquer the capital as quickly as possible, the crown prince used almost all the resources and power in the capital region. He disregarded the consequences. In order to gather enough money, countless rich and powerful families had their properties confiscated. No one knew how many commoners were mobilized. At that time there were countless refugees. In order to prevent the loss of population, many states in the capital region even sealed the city gates and forbade anyone from entering or leaving. Although this policy had been loosened, one still had to go through strict checks when entering or leaving the city. Hey, you guys, stop right there. When the guards saw someone come in, they immediately shouted and quickly walked over. In recent days, most of the people entering and leaving the city were refugees. It was rare to see such well-dressed people. Naturally, they had to be more careful. In this group of 6, 3 were white-haired elders. The other 3 were a burly man, a young man, and a young man. This was a rather strange combination. The guard took a look and quickly waved his hand, saying, let's go, let's go. Although these people did not look like refugees, they did not carry any weapons. They were also not the important people that the first prince had asked them to check. There was nothing to check. As long as the spies on the third prince's side were not released, they would not receive much punishment. Li Yi and the others walked into the city, planning to find a place to settle down. This was the capital of Xingzhou. It was where they were when he received Lin Wanru's last letter. The city of Xingzhou wasn't big. It couldn't be compared to the big cities in the future, but it was bigger than the counties in the future. Even so, it wasn't easy for them to find them in the city. After all, this was not the capital, nor was it Xuzhou, nor was it Rui. This was an area occupied by the Qi Kingdom. They did not have any influence here. It was not an easy task to find a few people. Su Jing walked around the street, and when he came back he said, I found a few strongholds of the holy religion, but this place is very close to the capital, so it's not easy to get in touch with them, just in case. Li nodded and said, don't act rashly for the time being. In addition to Chang, Su and Tian, Fang and Su Zheng also came on this trip. Fang had nothing to do and Su Zheng had something important to do. Finding Wanru was the most important thing, and if possible he wanted to establish the holy religion. Of course they couldn't act rashly now. This place was close to the headquarters of the holy religion, and it was in someone else's territory. If Taoist none found out, it would be a little troublesome even if they had 3 grandmasters. After all, even a grandmaster couldn't fight against so many people. If they really surrounded the city with tens of thousands of soldiers, even a grandmaster couldn't do anything, although the possibility was very small. In Xingzhou, several shops of the Qian family had been closed and even sealed. The Qian god of fortune was Zhao Yi's #1 henchman. If Zhao Jing got the chance, he would naturally not let the Qian family go. The Lin family's business had not had time to expand to Xingzhou, but looking at the fate of the Qian family, even if the Lin family had a shop in Xingzhou, it would be difficult to find them. Almost all the clues were cut off. Li Yi also thought of putting up a notice, but this was Xingzhou, and the Lin family had long been labeled as King Feng. This would be too ostentatious, so he immediately ruled it out. If you can't find her, let her come out to find you. Do you really need to make it so difficult? Chang's voice was always so gloomy. Fang said in surprise, we don't even know where Miss Lin is. How can we let her come out on her own? Changde looked at him and said, if we strip you naked and hang you on the city wall, everyone in Xingzhou will know. If Miss Lin sees you, she will know that we have arrived. Fang silently hid a little further away. This old man could not win in a fight, nor could he win in an argument. It was best to hide a little. He remembered that the son-in-law had said before that people who were physically handicapped would often be mentally handicapped. It seemed that it was true today. He turned to look at Li Yi and said, son-in-law, I think it is better for us to take our time to think about it. The longer we delay, the better. Li Yi shook his head and said, I think there is some truth in what Chief Steward Chang said. Fang looked at him and moved to the side. What Chang said made sense. Naturally, it was not to strip Fang naked and hang him on the city wall. It was the most time-consuming and laborious way to find him, and the efficiency was the worst. Only by breaking the rules could it be effective. In this Xingzhou, the one with the greatest authority and the greatest influence naturally belonged to the provincial governor of Xingzhou. Once he became the provincial governor of Xingzhou, the remaining work would be easy to carry out. Fang stood on the street and stopped a passerby who was hurrying by. He asked, may I ask how to get to the provincial governor's manor? That person looked at him and asked, are you also going to attend the wedding banquet of the young master of the provincial governor? Wedding banquet? Fang started and asked, what wedding banquet? A moment later, Fang walked back again and said, son-in-law, the provincial governor's manor is holding some kind of wedding banquet tonight. It said that the young master of the family of the provincial governor of Xingzhou is going to marry some number of concubines. Should we go and join in the fun? Li Yi thought for a moment. Today they were going to the provincial governor's manor of Xingzhou to cause trouble. Picking an auspicious day for the wedding of the son of the provincial governor to cause trouble, wasn't this a little too much? This provincial governor is really not a good person. What time is it now, and he's still using the excuse of marrying a concubine to extort the wealth of the people. The commoners outside are very resentful. Fang had an indignant expression and said, it said that the son of the provincial governor of Xingzhou has already married 7 concubines. Li Yi suddenly felt that it wasn't too much. He thought for a moment and said, let's do it tonight. Today was an auspicious day. The son of provincial governor Ma was going to marry his 8th concubine today. Of course, it was an auspicious day for the Ma residents, but it wasn't for the commoners of Xingzhou. Every time the son of the provincial governor married a concubine, they would have to pay a tax for this reason. In the past it was still fine. It was a good year and they could still endure such a tax every year. But not long ago they had already been extorted by the crown prince. If they were extorted by provincial governor Ma again, they would be a little tight on money. However, in the current Xingzhou, the words of provincial governor Ma were like the imperial edict. Those who listened could still live, but those who didn't would only have a path to death. The commoners secretly complained about this, but on the surface, they didn't dare to say anything even though they were angry. At the city gate, a few soldiers guarding the city were leaning on the city wall. One of them looked at the sky and said, tonight is a big banquet at the provincial governor's manor. If we close the city gates earlier, we might be able to get a bowl of wine to drink. Extremely right, extremely right. It's not common to see a banquet at the provincial governor's manor. Although we can't sit at the table, we can still stand outside and drink a mouthful of wine. Why don't we close the city gates earlier? His words received the unanimous approval of the people around him. The young master of the provincial governor was marrying a concubine. Although the etiquette wasn't very complicated, and there was no need to bow to the heavens and the earth, the banquet wasn't shabby at all. Even if they passed by the entrance of the provincial governor's manor and said a few auspicious words, they would still be able to get some wine to drink. The few of them discussed for a while and decided to close the city gates earlier. However, when the city gates were closed halfway, they suddenly heard the hurried sounds of horse hooves in front of them. The few of them raised their heads and saw a huge horse charging over. The 3 of them were so scared that they lost their spirit and hurriedly dodged. That steed brushed past them and disappeared into the city. Only then did the few of them regain their senses. They cursed loudly. Which idiot is it? That person had already disappeared. The few of them cursed and closed the city gates again. At this moment in Xingzhou City, a white-robed female stopped a passerby and asked, "How do I get to the provincial governor's manor?" Chapter 1137. In recent days, the third imperial prince had started a coup, and the first imperial prince had sent troops to surround the city. The entire capital region had been affected to varying degrees. In Victory Province, the commoners were worried about the war situation, grumbling and complaining. On the other hand, the provincial governor's manor was filled with jubilation. Today was a joyous day for the provincial governor's manor. The manor was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and there was an endless stream of guests coming and going in front of the manor's gates. There were 2 secretaries responsible for recording the list of gifts, and each of them wrote furiously until their wrists were sore. Every time the young master took in a concubine, there would be an endless stream of people coming from the nearby provinces to send gifts. This was the time of year when the provincial governor's manor received the most income. When Li Yi, Su, and Chang entered the provincial governor's manor, they naturally didn't need to go through the main gate. They were all experts who came and went. If they went through the main gate, how could they show off their status as experts? Most importantly, they hadn't prepared any gifts and they didn't have invitations. It would be too troublesome to rob them on the spot. Wine and meat stinked at the gates and there were frozen bones on the road. The more chaotic the world, the more obvious this difference was. Many of the commoners of Victory Province were already starving, and their clothes were barely covering their bodies. However, this provincial governor's manor was filled with jubilation. There was wine and meat everywhere and it was very lively. This caused the trace of guilt that Li Yi had felt for disturbing someone else's happy occasion to completely disappear. In a secluded courtyard in the back residence, all the noise and excitement were isolated outside. Xiao's face was filled with anxiety as she paced around in the room mumbling, "What should I do? What should I do? It's about to start, but Li hasn't come yet. What should I do?" Lin Wanru sat by the bed and looked at Lin Yong at the side. She said, "In a while take Xiao and leave." Lin Yong was startled and asked, "Then what about you, miss?" Lin Wanru didn't look at him. She calmly said, "I have my own ways." "No." Lin Yong flatly refused. "If miss doesn't leave, we won't leave either." A determined expression appeared on Xiao's small face as she said, "I won't leave either. If we leave, we'll leave together." The sound of footsteps came from outside the door. An old woman and a few maids walked in. As soon as they entered the door, they said anxiously, "Aya, what time is it? Why haven't you changed your clothes? It's almost too late. Hurry, hurry." The old woman looked at the maidservants beside her and said, "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and help the bride dress up." Xiao stood in front of Lin Wanru and said, "Xiao, miss is not ready?" Xiao's sister. The servant girls looked at Xiao and said, "Young Xiao young, before, where?" A few maidservants dragged Xiao out of the courtyard. The old woman then looked at Lin Wanru and said, "Aya, why aren't you in a hurry at all? Although we don't need to bow to heaven and earth, it will take a while to dress up. If we're late and young master blames us, I won't be able to take it." Lin Yong rolled up his sleeves. Lin Wanru looked at him and he looked at the old woman with hatred and strode out. The old woman closed the door and immediately ordered the servant girls beside her, "You guys hurry up. If there is any delay, I won't forgive you. Take out all the jewelry, wedding dress, hurry up and take out the wedding dress." Scissors, who did this? They didn't even cut the tag. People will die of laughter if they wear it. What? The scissors are gone. Go, go, go. Go outside and find another one. After half an hour, the old woman walked around the bed and said with a smile, "I've been in this business for so long, but this is the first time I've seen such a beautiful bride." She waved to the servant girls behind her and said, "Quickly cover the bride's head and send her to the bridal chamber." When everything was over, she let out a long sigh of relief. She walked out of the courtyard and met an old man who was walking towards her. "Good luck." "Good luck." The two of them greeted each other. The old woman looked at the old man in surprise and asked, "Geezer Wang, what's wrong with you? Why are you so listless? Did the young master not give you the money to calculate the date?" The two of them were in the same profession. One was in charge of the bride's etiquette and the other was in charge of calculating the auspicious date. They often worked together. Geezer Wang looked at him and just sighed and shook his head. The old woman suddenly thought of something and asked, "You didn't calculate the date wrong, did you?" The old man's face immediately turned red and he said angrily, "Old woman Lin, don't talk nonsense. I Geezer Wang am famous. How could I calculate the date wrong? If you didn't calculate the date wrong, why are you frowning? You look like your wife died. You're crazy. The old woman glanced at him and left. Seeing that Zhang Xian had walked far away, the old man shook his head. As he walked, he said hatefully, inauspicious, inauspicious. I told you that the auspicious day would be 3 months later, but you refused to listen. You can't blame me if something happens. Outside the small courtyard, somewhere in the shadows, Lin Yong gritted his teeth and said, I'll save the young miss no matter what. He turned to look at Xiu and said in a low voice, wait here for a while. I'll ask the others to find a way to send you out. With that, he strode away. Xiu stood in a daze for a long time. After a while, she finally couldn't help but squat down and cry loudly. After an unknown period of time, a familiar voice rang in her ears. What's wrong? Did Lin Yong steal your Tonghulu again? Xiu raised her head. The tears in her eyes were reflected by the lights in the distance, sparkling brightly. A servant of the provincial governor's manor supported the young master and led him to a certain courtyard. The servant hurriedly said, Young master, slow down, slow down, slow down. The young man reeked of alcohol and said, If I'm slow, won't the bride be anxious? The bride can't run away. The servant said and hurriedly said, Young master, slow down, be careful not to fall. When the two of them walked to the entrance of the courtyard, they happened to meet a few other people. The servant was stunned at first, then he pointed to the back and said, You're going in the wrong direction. The gate is over there. He just thought that these people were guests who went the wrong way. After saying that, he helped the young man to enter. Changde looked at Li Yi and said, You go in first. Changde's voice was sharp. The young man didn't hear clearly what the old man said, but the voice made him very uncomfortable. He frowned and said, Neither a man nor a woman. Why does my father invite everyone to his house? Su looked at the young man with pity. Suddenly he felt a chill in his crotch and couldn't help but reach out to touch it. Changde took the young man from the servant and said, Go do your work. I'll support him. The servant unconsciously let go of his hand and then reacted and asked, You are? Before he could finish his words, he fell to the ground. Li Yi looked at Chang, nodded, and walked into the courtyard. The young man's tragic cry was heard. In the room, Lin Wanru sat on the edge of the bed with a red veil covering her head. This red veil seemed to isolate everything outside. Just now, after those servant girls helped her dress up, she took a look at herself in the mirror. The person in the mirror was beautiful beyond compare. People often said that the most beautiful moment in a woman's life was when she put on her wedding dress. This saying was indeed true. It was a pity that the person in her heart didn't see her wearing the wedding dress. Her right hand was holding a pair of scissors. For more than half a year, she had been learning martial arts from Rui. She wasn't a weak woman in the traditional sense. That provincial governor's son wasn't a match for her. Tonight was her last chance. She had to take him hostage and force the provincial governor of Sheng province to send them out of the city. This was her only choice. The door was opened from the outside. Her heart tightened. There were footsteps coming from the door and coming to the bed. A hand lifted her veil. She suddenly stood up and raised her hand. The scissors in her hand went straight to his neck. Her wrist was grabbed in midair and the scissors were taken away by another hand. Her face was pale and her heart quickly sank. Li Yi looked at her and said in surprise, You want to murder your husband on the wedding night? Chapter 1138. Tonight, the provincial governor's manor of Sheng province was very lively. It was filled with guests and hosts. The provincial governor of Sheng province was very fond of his only son. Almost every year he would hold a grand wedding banquet for him. It was a pity that although the young master of the provincial governor had many wives and concubines, none of them could give birth to a son or daughter for the Ma clan. The people of Sheng province discussed in secret. It was most likely that the Ma clan had done all sorts of evil deeds and the heavens were punishing them. They purposely caused the Ma clan to die without descendants to rid the world of this scourge. Of course they were only discussing in secret. In Sheng province, the Ma clan was the local tyrant. They had to pay the taxes and give the gifts that they had to give. Once they disobeyed, a great disaster would befall them. Provincial Governor's Manor. Congratulations, Lord Provincial Governor. I hope young Master Ma will have a son soon. Everyone, don't stand on ceremony today. Drink to your heart's content. The guests that had entered the manor cupped their hands and congratulated. After 3 rounds of drinking, the provincial governor of Sheng province had finished dealing with the guests. He was a little tipsy and cupped his hands. Everyone continue. I will go and rest first. He was supported back to his bedroom by the servants. When he closed the door and walked to the bedside, he discovered that there was already a person sitting at the table in the room. It was an old man with white hair. He looked a little sloppy and was currently sitting there looking at him with an indifferent gaze. When he saw this unfamiliar old man, his body trembled and he immediately sobered up. He asked warily, "Who are you?" The sloppy old man reached his hand into his bosom and took out a dark red pill. He looked at him and said, "Eat this." He did not recognize this old man. A person that he did not recognize had appeared in his bedroom just like that. The provincial governor of Sheng province did not hesitate to turn and run out the door. As he ran he shouted, "Help, help, there's an assassin." Just as he shouted he felt a sudden pain at the back of his neck. He could not help but open his mouth in pain. He felt something had entered his mouth and melted. That thing tasted extremely bitter, so bitter that tears almost flowed down his face. He squatted on the ground with tears and mucus flowing down his face. He stuck his finger into his throat as if he wanted to dig that thing out. However, he only retched a few times and did not vomit anything out. He looked at the old man in horror and asked, "You, what did you give me to eat?" The sloppy old man explained, "One-day life-taking powder." Not waiting for the provincial governor of Victory Province to ask again, he explained, "The Death Reaper in a day is concocted using honey, snow pear, white rabbit and celestial mountain snow lotus. It is a top-notch poison in the world. As the name suggests, if you are poisoned by this poison and don't receive the antidote within a day, your 7 apertures will bleed, your intestines will rot, and you will eventually turn into a puddle of pus." Provincial governor of Sheng province paled, but he forced himself to maintain his expression. Looking at him he said, "How can there be such a strange poison in this world? Do you think this official has grown up scared?" The sloppy old man lightly tapped on his body, and the provincial governor of Sheng province immediately knelt on the ground. The veins on his forehead bulged, and the blood vessels were like many earthworms wriggling on his forehead. He couldn't speak and could only let out beast-like moans of pain from his throat. Not long after, a wet spot appeared on the ground beneath him. Some of it was sweat that seeped out from his body, some of it was urine. The sloppy old man tapped on his body with slight disdain, and only then did he stop wriggling. However, he would still twitch from time to time. "Do you believe me now?" The sloppy old man looked at him and said, "If you are a little more obedient, you will suffer less. You are already so old, yet you still don't understand this simple logic." Provincial governor of Sheng province's complexion was completely pale. Using his last bit of strength he asked, "You, who are you?" In a certain courtyard in the provincial governor's manor, the young master's drunkenness had already completely dissipated. His face was filled with terror. Looking at the shady old man opposite him, he asked with a trembling voice, "You, what did you do to me earlier?" Just now, this terrifying old man had only lightly tapped on his lower abdomen, and a certain part of him had immediately become as hard as iron. It was even more effective than those tiger and wolf medicines that he had eaten. But later on he had tapped on the same place again, and then he had lost a great deal of energy, a piece of iron turning into cotton. Although he was usually very fast, he had never been this fast before. He faintly felt that something extremely terrifying had happened to his body. Changde did not explain anything to him. He casually knocked him out and tossed him to the side. Inside the room, Li put down the red veil, looked at Lin Wanru and asked in concern, "Are you all right?" Lin Wanru looked at him and said, "If you had come a little later, something would have happened." Li was slightly astonished and asked, "How did you guys come to the provincial governor's manor? You didn't receive that letter?" Lin Wanru looked at him and asked. Li shook his head and said, "I saw the letter saying that you guys were trapped in the city of Sheng province, so I immediately rushed over." Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, "Then how did you find this place?" "I first took down the provincial governor's manor, and then it would be easier to find you guys." He let out a long sigh and said, "Fortunately I made it in time." When he had encountered Xiao, Li had not been in a hurry to ask about it. Only now did he know that they had originally been trapped in Sheng province, and could not leave the city. Later on, a few riots had erupted in the city, and they and the majority of the guards had been separated. Then they had been seen by the son of the provincial governor, and had been brought to the provincial governor's manor, almost half invited and half coerced, resulting in today's matter. He rejoiced slightly. If he had been a little later, everything would have been too late. Li let out a sigh, and then he was in the mood to carefully examine her. She was already 24 years old this year, and in the future, it was the age when women were in their prime. She did not have the immaturity of a young girl, nor did she have the maturity of a married woman. Rather, she had a different kind of grace in between. Lin Wanru combed a strand of messy hair on her temple and asked, "Do I look good?" Li Yi was startled and then said, "The way you look in a wedding dress is very good." She blinked her eyes and then asked, "Do you like it?" This time, Li Yi was startled for a longer time and then he nodded slightly, "I like it." Speaking the truth and being frank. Only from an aesthetic point of view. That was all. A woman can only wear a wedding dress once in her life. Lin Wanru stood up and slowly said, "The moment they put on the wedding dress is the moment they are the most beautiful." Li Yi looked at her and said, "This time doesn't count. This wedding dress is not very good, you should take it off." Lin Wanru looked down and then she pinched the hem of her dress and turned in a circle in front of Li Yi, and then she shook her head and said, "This wedding dress. I actually quite like it and I have dressed up for so long I can't waste my makeup, and this wedding room is also very well decorated. I have worn it." She looked at the wedding dress on her and then looked at Li Yi and suddenly said, "Why don't you marry me?" Chapter 1139. Li Yi also felt that it was a bit wasteful. The guests had been invited, the banquet had been held, the wedding clothes had been worn, and the wedding house had been decorated. If nothing happened, it would be a waste of the wealth that the governor of Xing province had plundered from the people. It would be a shame to the people of Xing province and a shame to the people of the world. But compared to when drunken Ink Ruoqing got married, it was still a bit shabby. He looked around and asked, "Isn't it too hasty?" Lin Wanru sat on the edge of the bed and looked away from him. She said, "This time I had thought that I would never see you again." Li Yi sighed softly. In this world there were many things that were destined. If one really had to talk about it, the main culprit for them being trapped in Xing province was actually him, so all of this could be said to be his own doing. There was a relaxed smile on Lin Wanru's face. She said, "At that time I thought if I died like this, it would be such a pity. I haven't married yet, haven't waited for 2 years when no one wants me to marry you. Some things should not be delayed." She turned to look at Li Yi and said, "There is no time like the present. Instead of waiting for 2 years, it is better to do it now." She walked to the table and poured 2 cups of wine. She handed one to him and said, "Will you marry me?" Li Yi took the wine cup. Her wrist went around Li Yi's wrist, and the two drank the wine in the cup in one gulp. He looked at her and said apologetically, "I am sorry to have made you wait so long." In fact, regarding this matter, he had already confessed to Rui before he came. The debt of love that he had caused, he had to pay it back even if he had to kneel. Of course, the bite mark on his arm from Rui was still there. When they crossed cups of wine, the moment they raised their head, Li Yi seemed to see a familiar scene out of the corner of his eye. When he put down the wine cup, he realized that it was not an illusion. Mississippi Lu crossed her arms over her chest and leaned against the door, looking at him calmly. She looked at him, then looked at Lin Wanru and asked, "Should I come a day later?" Outside the yard. Su looked at Changda and asked, "Does this count as being caught red-handed in bed?" Naturally, Chang would not be so bored as to answer his question. Su didn't expect him to answer. He shook his head and said, "Dikiske, I'm still 1 step too late. I can't even be ranked 5th now." Li Yi did not expect Rui to arrive so timely. He did not know that after they left, she sent a letter to Liuzhou and that Mississippi Lu would travel day and night to come here personally because of that letter. Even if he didn't find the provincial governor's manor today, with Rui around, Wanru and the others would be fine. After all, she would always appear when she should and shouldn't appear. The provincial governor of Xingzhou was already under Su's control. After eating an overdose of white rabbit creamy herb, complemented by Su's unique secret technique, he was not afraid that he would not listen to him after tasting that kind of feeling that was worse than death. As for the son of the provincial governor who had committed all kinds of crimes, he had also paid a heavy price for offending the narrow-minded director Chang. From a certain point of view, he could no longer be called a son. Li Yi lay on the bed, his hands behind his head, a trace of fear still lingering in his heart. Fortunately, nothing went wrong in the end. It was just that Rui's appearance was a little too untimely. Otherwise, he would probably be able to talk to Wanru all night, talking about life and ideals. Before coming, he had actually thought of many ways, but he had not expected that the one who was seduced in the end would be himself. At home, Rui's martial arts were too high and he couldn't beat her. As the Empress, Ruoqing was in charge of hundreds of thousands of people. Drunk Imo always liked to be at the top and only Ruoqing listened to him. Shopkeeper Lin was indeed the same Shopkeeper Lin. If she was as domineering as before, her husband's authority might still be weak in the future. In another room, Mississippi Lu sat in front of the table, hugging autumn water, lost in thought. There was a knock on the door. She stood up and walked over to open the door. Lin Wanru came in with a quilt in her arms and said, "I've experienced many things in the past few days. I feel a little uneasy. I'll sleep with you tonight." Mississippi Lu didn't respond, but she didn't refuse either. With her personality, this was a tacit agreement. Lin Wanru walked to the bed, made the bed and sat down next to her again. In fact, the two of them had a very good relationship, although neither of them liked to take the initiative to talk. Tonight, the one who broke the silence was Lin Wanru. She thought for a while, looked up at Mississippi Lu and said, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about this. Everyone can see what happened between you two." Mississippi Lu looked at her and said, "Before I came, Dwayner asked me if he could call Aunt Wanru mother when she comes back." Lin Wanru smiled and asked, "Did Dwayner ask when he could call Aunt mother?" "No." Mississippi Lu put autumn water down and picked it up again. She said calmly, "Don't drag me into your matters." "Rui." Lin Wanru looked at her and suddenly said, "How long are you going to wait?" Mississippi Lu held Autumn Water's hand tightly and said calmly, "I'm not waiting for anything. I've searched for her thousands of times, but when I look back, she's in the dim light." Lin Wanru had a faint smile on her face and said, "This is the best Upper Yuan poem I've ever heard." Mississippi Lu stood up and said, "I'm sleepy, I'm going to sleep." Lin Wanru watched her walk to the bedside, sighed softly, blew out the light and walked over slowly. When she walked to the bedside, Mississippi Lu had already closed her eyes. She took off her clothes and lay down beside her. When her breathing began to stabilize, a pair of eyes slowly opened beside her. Xianxia had cried for too long last night. When she woke up in the morning, although her face was full of smiles, her eyes were still swollen. Mississippi Lu woke up even later than Li Yi. She had two panda eyes and her complexion was worse than Xiaoer's. She probably didn't sleep well last night. Li Yi gave her 2 hard-boiled eggs. He wanted her to roll them in her eyes to get rid of the dark circles, but she actually peeled the eggs and ate them. Mississippi Lu only ate the egg whites. Li Yi ate the remaining egg yolks and cooked 2 more for her, specifically telling her that they weren't for eating. After saving Wanru, they should have immediately set off to go back. However, since they were already here, if they didn't kill some Taoist nuns along the way, Su and Elder Tian wouldn't be in a good mood. So this morning, Su Zheng brought people to occupy the branch of holy religion in Qing State. They simply moved to the branch of holy religion and waited for the Taoist nuns. Outside the capital, the 150,000 garrison soldiers of the capital had been in a stalemate with the 50,000 Imperial Army soldiers for more than 2 months. Although there was a huge disparity between the two sides in terms of military strength, it was still not enough to take down a country's capital with just this amount of military strength. If one wanted to use up the food supplies of the capital by surrounding it so that the city would collapse on its own, one would have to be prepared for a prolonged battle. There was enough food in the capital to last for several more months, but the 150,000 soldiers outside the city also needed food supplies. In the last 2 months, Zhao Zheng had scraped the ground, giving the provincial governors of 10 some provinces a strict order that they had to ensure a sufficient supply of food. In a tent, a purple-clothed man looked at Fang Yu and said, "Protector, for some reason we lost contact with our branch in Qing State half a month ago. There's also been no news from the blue-clothed emissaries." Qing State. A hint of confusion appeared on Fang Yu's face. The entire capital region was now under their control. With a single order, he could command an army of 100,000 soldiers. Who would dare to make trouble for the holy religion in Qing State? It had been a very long time since a branch of the holy religion had become uncontactable. Although this routine was very familiar, he didn't believe that anyone would be so bold as to act so atrociously here. He glanced at the purple-clothed emissary and said, "Go see the branch in Qing State for yourself." Chapter 1140. Xingzhou. After the purple-clothed emissary left the tent, Fang Yu put the matter behind him for the time being. There were 8 purple-clothed emissaries in the holy religion, and each of them could be ranked on the so-called heaven list of martial arts experts. A purple-clothed emissary and a few blue-clothed emissaries were enough to deal with all the problems in the branch in Xingzhou. He did not care about a mere branch in Xingzhou. What he cared about was the supreme position in the capital. Zhao Zheng trusted him very much because the holy religion was Zhao Zheng's last chance. Only by relying on the holy religion could he conquer the capital and become the new emperor of the Qi kingdom. Thanks to Zhao Zheng's trust, he was able to gain control of the 150,000 soldiers in Beijing-Hebei province in such a short period of time. Of course, in terms of numbers, the number of followers of the holy religion was more than this number, but the meaning of the two was different. He was the guardian of the right of the holy religion, second only to one above tens of thousands, and leading more than 100,000 followers. But if he could become the emperor of a country, he would be above millions and tens of millions of people. This was the difference between heaven and earth. A figure walked into the tent. Feng Yu glanced at her, and his expression immediately became solemn. He bowed and said, "Your Highness." The Taoist nun walked inside and asked indifferently, "Did something happen in the branch in Xingzhou?" Feng Yu hurriedly nodded and said, "I've sent the purple-clothed emissary to investigate it personally." The middle-aged Taoist nun did not continue this topic. She turned to look at him and suddenly asked, "Do you want to replace Zhao Zheng?" Feng Yu's expression changed. He clenched his teeth and said, "Auntie, Zhao Zheng is a narrow-minded man. He doesn't keep his word. We can't trust him so easily. I'm afraid the first thing he will do after he ascends to the throne will be to get even with us. We can't place our hopes on him. As long as he sits in that position, I naturally have a way to make him listen to me." The Taoist nun looked at him and said, "You're not a legitimate member of the Zhao family. Even if you conquer the capital, the courtiers won't agree, and neither will the people of the Qi kingdom. If you want to sit on the throne, the whole world will oppose you. When that time comes, you won't even be able to take care of yourself. How can you avenge your family?" "Auntie?" The Taoist nun looked at him and continued to ask, "Revenge for your family or your selfish desires, which is more important?" "Of course, revenge is more important." Feng Yu was silent for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "I know I was wrong." The middle-aged Taoist nun walked to the door, then turned around and said, "Xingzhou is already part of the capital region. The branch won't get into trouble easily. Keep an eye on this matter." Feng Yu bowed and said, "Yes." After the Taoist nun left, Feng Yu paced a few times in the tent and sat down again. Vengeance was important, but it was even more important to be an emperor who held great power and did whatever he wanted. The holy religion has 8 purple-robed emissaries, and each of them is in charge of a branch in several states. Now that we've taken down one, there are 7 left. Su Jing sat opposite Li Yi and continued, "The position of the purple-robed emissaries in the holy religion is only below that of the empress and the protectors. Each of them is very important and indispensable. The disappearance of one of them will definitely attract great attention, and even the empress will come personally." What Li Yi wanted was the empress coming personally. If it weren't for the fact that they had limited energy and manpower, he would even want to destroy all the branches of the holy religion in the capital region. He didn't believe that the Taoist nun would still be able to sit still. Here, Elder Su had been waiting for her for so long that he couldn't wait any longer. After taking down the Taoist nun, Ruoqing would be the only empress, and the holy religion of the Lin family would be completely in his hands. At the same time, he could help Zhao Yi out of trouble and return the favor of taking care of the Lin family all these years. It was the best of both worlds. The goal was clear, the plan was smooth, and everything was perfect. The only thing that was not so perfect was that Mississippi Lu was sick. Except for that time in Fengzhou when she was seriously injured, Li Yi had never seen Mississippi Lu sick in the past few years. She didn't even have the most common cold and fever. He had always thought that Rui was a superman, and that the illnesses of mortals had nothing to do with her. Only now did he realize that he was wrong and very wrong. She didn't get up in the morning, and she didn't even get up when it was time for breakfast. She was never like this usually, so Li Yi thought that she was not in the room. When he walked in, he found that she was still lying on the bed. Li Yi pushed her through the quilt and said, "The sun is shining on your butt. It's such a hot day and you're covered with such a thick quilt. Don't you feel hot?" Mississippi Lu didn't respond. Li Yi poked his head over and found that her face was very red. It was not the kind of blush that was shy but a white blush. When he placed his palm on her forehead, his expression changed. She has been running around day and night these days and her body is already tired. She also caught a little cold and that's why she is like this. Not to mention her, even the body of a grandmaster has a limit. Elder Tian took his hand away from her wrist and said, "I'll write a prescription. After you get the medicine, boil it for a few days and pay attention to rest. You'll be fine." Only then did Li Yi realize that Rui had set off a few days later than them, but she had arrived in Xingzhou almost at the same time as them. She probably didn't rest well in between. "I'll go get the medicine." In the past, Li Yi had bought and boiled medicine for Mississippi Lu countless times, so it was a walk in the park for him. He personally went to the pharmacy to buy the medicine, boiled it, and let it cool before bringing it to her bedside. Li Yi tested the temperature of the medicine, blew on it and put the bowl down. He said, "There's no white rabbit creamy concoction and Su didn't bring it with him. Just make do with it this time and I'll make another one for you later." Mississippi Lu was not afraid of anything, but she was afraid of bitterness. This was her only weakness that Li Yi had discovered. A piece of candy and a mouthful of medicine. This was something that they had agreed on a long time ago. Mississippi Lu took a small sip and her brows furrowed. She said, "There's no white rabbit creamy concoction, then put some sugar in it." No. Li Yi refused without any hesitation. He said, "Have you seen anyone put sugar in medicine? Will it still be effective? Then I won't drink it. I'll be fine after resting for a couple of days." Mississippi Lu also refused without hesitation. To her, drinking medicine was the most painful thing in the world. Li looked at her and threatened, "Don't make me do it." Mississippi Lu also looked at him and said calmly, "You can try." Li really did not dare to try. Even if Emingzu was standing in front of him, he would still dare to have a fair fight with Emingzu. However, if it was Mississippi Lu, he would not dare. After all, she only had a cold this time and not a serious injury. Li was worried that if they fought, he would be the one to eat the white rabbit creamy concoction in the end. "Then I'll ask Elder Tian if I can put sugar in it." He sighed. On the surface, Rui was a martial arts master with a cold temperament, but in reality she was just a child who could not grow up. After hearing his words, Elder Tian looked at him in surprise and said, "It's not that you can't, but the effect of the medicine will be greatly reduced. It's just drinking medicine. Is there a need to go through so much trouble?" Li shook his head. This kind of thing varied from person to person. He had to spoil her. After all, she was Rui, just this once. When Li walked into the room again, he placed the bowl of medicine in front of her. Mississippi Lu took a sip and frowned. She said, "It's still bitter. Add a little more." Li looked at her and said, "Don't go too far. Any more and it'll be useless. Hold your breath and drink it in one go. That way you won't feel the bitterness." Mississippi Lu frowned. She held her breath and drank the entire bowl of black medicine. She put down the bowl and clutched her chest. She frowned and only calmed down after a while. She raised her head to look at Li Yi and asked, "Why does it taste as bitter as without sugar?" "Because I really didn't put sugar in it." Li looked at her and said, "Didn't you drink it all without sugar?" Mississippi Lu looked at him and pointed at the long sword hanging on the wall. She said, "Help me get the autumn water." Li did not understand. Rui is already so sick. Why would she need the autumn water? What she needs is a good rest. Fang did not understand either. The second young mistress had a serious cold. However, when he saw her chase after the son-in-law, it did not seem like it, outside the capital, in a tent. The middle-aged Taoist nun frowned. Did Envoy Qinzi not return? Fang Yu's expression was also a little unsightly. After Envoy Qinzi left, there was no more news. The blue-clothed envoys that were sent were also not heard from. Fang Yu looked at the purple-clothed people behind him and said, "The four of you go together. You must find out what happened in Sheng province and where Envoy Qinzi is now." The middle-aged Taoist nun shook her head and said, "There's no need. This time I'll go personally." Fang Yu thought for a while and said, "The four of you follow Her Highness. If something happens you can take care of her." "Yes." The four of them bowed in unison. Chapter 1141. Rui didn't usually get sick. It was rare for her to get sick, but she didn't get better. She didn't have a fever anymore, but she kept coughing. It wasn't the season for pears to ripen, and they weren't in Jing Kingdom or Rui City. Li spent a lot of effort to find a few and made a honey pear for her. Li brought the honey pear in and said, "It's good for stopping coughs and reducing phlegm. More. Don't forget to drink the rest of the soup. Don't waste it." It was better to be a patient. There were people to take care of everything. If it wasn't for the fact that he was sick, Li would like to get sick like this. Mississippi Lu ate a few slices of the pear. There were still a few left. She lay back on the bed and looked at Li Yi. She said, "I can't eat any more. You can eat the rest. Don't waste it." "I'm not eating," Li Yi said firmly. Mississippi Lu looked at him. "Don't misunderstand. I'm not looking down on you." Li looked at her and explained, "I'm just afraid that you'll infect me." Li ate the few slices of pear in the end. Of course, it wasn't because he was worried that Rui would think that he was looking down on her and find a chance to take revenge in the future. He just didn't want to waste it. After all, it took a lot of effort to make this. Li put down the bowl and looked at her. He asked, "What do you want to eat today? I'll make it for you." Mississippi Lu thought for a moment and said, "Steamed fish, sweet and sour pork ribs, emingzi tofu, wolfberry yam." Li counted with his fingers. There were 8 dishes and 1 soup. He looked at Mississippi Lu and asked, "Are you a pig? Then make a bowl of noodles." Mississippi Lu shook her head and said, "Add more vegetables." Li waved his hand. 8 dishes and 1 soup. I haven't cooked for a long time. I'm afraid that I'm rusty. Let me try. He rolled up his sleeves and walked out. Soon a sound came from outside the courtyard. "Xiua, is the fish we bought yesterday still alive? If it's dead, ask Lin Yong to buy another one. There's no more tofu. Don't forget to ask him to bring another piece when he comes back. And yam buy the thin-skinned ones." Mississippi Lu leaned on the bed and coughed a few times. She bent her legs and wrapped her arms around her knees. She looked out of the door in a daze. In the courtyard, Su looked at Changde beside him and said, "Old man Chang, why don't we make a bet on where Rui ranks?" Changde habitually cherished his words like gold. Su thought for a moment and said, "How about we make a bet? Between her and your princess, who will come first?" Changde looked at him and said, "Don't worry, if I see the Taoist nun, I will be lenient." "Why are you saying this?" Su glanced at him, then nodded and said, "I don't need you to be lenient. She's mine. You don't have to interfere in this matter." "Okay," Changde agreed without hesitation and turned to leave. Su was stunned. This old man usually liked to go against him. Why did he suddenly become so obedient this time? He was not used to it. He stood up and looked at Elder Tian, who was standing not far behind him, and said, "Don't tell me this old man's personality has changed? Don't you think it's strange? Whether he's changed or not, we'll talk about it later." Elder Tian looked at him and said, "Explain to me first, who is yours?" Li was processing the fish in the kitchen. He looked back and saw that the courtyard was in chaos. He deeply felt that to be able to marry a grandmaster like Rui, who was as understanding and gentle as water, was a blessing accumulated over several lifetimes. Whoever married someone with a bad temper like Elder Tian would be beaten up every day. Fortunately, there was no one with such a temper in his family. Rui was gentle with Wanru, and Ruoqing and Zuamo never fought over anything. Xuanhuan was even less so. Although Wanru was a little domineering, it mostly manifested in business. She had not been idle these days either. She was busy evacuating many shops outside the capital region, and there were countless orders being sent out every day. Only Rui was an anomaly. Li swore to train hard. The days before she became a grandmaster were his last chance. Although Mississippi Lu's recovery was slower, it was getting better every day. This made Li finally feel relieved. Cold was a very general concept here. Every year there were countless people who lost their lives because of cold. Fortunately, Rui had a good physique and a good figure. She could turn any situation into a blessing. After taking medicine for a few days, she was basically fine except for some coughing. There was still no movement in Fengzhou City these days. After the few people sent by the holy religion did not return, they actually did not send anyone over. This made Li extremely suspect that Taoist nun had given up on this place. However, there was nothing he could do about it. She did not come and he could not force her to come. Moreover, Taoist nun was Su's concern. It was good that he was concerned about her. These days, Li's attention was on Rui, and he had no time to care about her. Since Rui was sick, Li noticed that she often began to daydream. She would maintain the same posture for a long time. A cold would not make a person daydream. Elder Tian said that she was tired and couldn't let go of the knot in her heart. Otherwise she would not have suddenly fallen ill. A small cold took so long to deal with. What knot could Rui have? She never talked about it and Li never knew. Was it because she had seen too many grandmasters these days and it stimulated her? Li did not know. He brought a bowl of medicine into her room. This was the last bowl. He actually saw Mississippi Lu drinking, and there were a few side dishes on the table. He put the bowl of medicine on the table and said with a sullen face, "You haven't recovered yet. Who allowed you to drink?" "None of your business." Mississippi Lu originally wanted to say, "None of your business," but when she saw his face she swallowed the words. She said, "Elder Tian said. She said that my illness is no longer serious and it's okay to drink some wine." Li sat down opposite her and snatched her wine jar. He weighed it in his hand and found that half of the wine was gone. He glared at her angrily, raised his head, and drank the rest of the wine in the jar. This was a good wine from the provincial governor's mansion. After drinking so much at once, although she was not drunk, she was already a little dizzy. Considering her mood, he looked at her and said, "Forget it this time. Next time at least wait until you recover." He threw the empty jar aside, and Mississippi Lu took out another jar from under the table. This was a provocation, a blatant provocation. Li looked down and saw that there were no more jars under the table. Only then did he feel relieved and snatched the jar. He opened the seal and drank the small jar of wine again. He looked at Mississippi Lou and said, "Listen to me. When you recover, I will drink with you. Drinking now is not good for your health. It will be troublesome if your illness worsens." Mississippi Lou sat next to him and looked at him for a long time. Suddenly she asked, "Why are you so good to me?" Li looked at her and asked in surprise, "Are you drunk?" Mississippi Lou nodded. Li held onto the table and said, "You are Rui's younger sister. If I don't treat you well, who should I treat well?" Mississippi Lou looked at him and said, "Look into my eyes." Li turned his gaze and looked into her eyes. "Say it again," Mississippi Lou said calmly. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you are." Li looked into the pair of deep eyes that contained countless emotions and opened his mouth. "Because you are? Because I am your younger sister?" Li looked into her eyes, but he could not say these words. "Because you are Rui." Li looked at her and said, "The one and only Lu Rui in the world." Rui thought for a moment and asked, "Do you remember what you said that night?" "Which night?" "The night of your wedding. Others were Kong Rong's pair, but the three of them were sisters' pair. On the night of his wedding with Ruoqing Zumo, he was locked out by Rui and Ruoqing Zumo at the same time. That night he and Rui drank and chatted happily. That was the closest he had ever been to Rui. Whether it was the distance or the spirit." Li nodded and said, "I will support you." In fact, Li rarely saw Rui smile. She would only sneer when she was beating him. When she really showed that kind of happy smile, Li was disappointed to find that his heart seemed to have stopped beating. Clang. The wine jar in Li's hand fell to the ground, not because Rui smiled, but because of the soft touch on his lips. It was not a touch but a bump. Simple and violent. Fang walked in from outside and stood at the door. Seeing the situation in the room, he trembled and said, "Goo. Goo goo goo." Mississippi Lou tilted her head to look at him and said lightly, "Get out." He quickly turned around and strode out of the room, closing the door on his way out. He stood in the yard and never felt that the sun was so hot today. He must be blind, very blind, so blind that he had hallucinations. Chapter 1142. Li's mind went blank, but he thought of many things in an instant. Did he take too little time to brush his teeth in the morning? Did he eat something that he shouldn't have eaten in the morning? Did he taste the medicine for Rui just now? Was it hot or bitter? Was his mouth filled with a taste that she didn't like? And he drank wine just now. He really shouldn't have. He still didn't know where to put his hands. Would it be weird if he just let them hang like that? Should he put them on her waist? Shouldn't a man and a woman put their hands on her chest when kissing? But if he put them on her chest, would she beat him up? Regardless of whether Rui wanted to beat him up or not, he really wanted to beat Fang up now. It wasn't a vigorous French kiss, nor was it an extraordinary passionate kiss. He didn't even stick out his tongue. Lips touched, lips parted. That was all. "I like you." Rui looked at him with a very serious expression. "It started a long time ago. But why is it you? Why does it have to be you?" Li rarely saw Rui smile, but she would smile occasionally. He had never seen Rui cry, not even once. He didn't see her shed a tear, but after saying those two sentences, her face was already covered with tears. "I like you, why does it have to be you?" These two sentences didn't seem to have any logic, but Rui understood, and so did Li. No one understood the meaning of these two sentences better than them. He hugged her tightly. This was the first time that they were so close to each other. He looked at Rui and kissed her heavily, just like she had kissed him just now. The difference was that this time he stuck out his tongue. In the yard, Fang looked at the sloppy old man and said, "You win." He looked extremely puzzled and asked, "How do you know it's second miss?" The sloppy old man shrugged. "I guessed it." As soon as he said that, a loud sound rang in their ears. Somewhere in the room, a door burst open and wood splinters flew everywhere. They could only see a white shadow disappear into the courtyard. Fang's expression changed and he hurriedly ran over. Li walked out of the room. He stood in the courtyard in a daze for a long time. It wasn't until Fang kicked his butt that he came back to his senses. Fang looked at him and said with some disappointment, "What are you waiting for? Go after him." After a gust of wind, Li's figure disappeared from the courtyard. Fang turned around and saw the sloppy old man standing rooted to the ground. His face was filled with extreme shock, as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. He glanced at the sloppy old man and said lightly, "Haven't you already guessed it? Why are you pretending?" The sloppy old man put away his shocked expression and seemed to recall some past events. He let out a long sigh and muttered, "There's no justice in this world, there's no justice in this world." When Li Yi stood on the street, he could no longer see Mississippi Lu's figure. A peddler picked up the scattered goods on the ground, looked in a certain direction and scolded angrily, "Why are you running so fast? Are you in a hurry to reincarnate?" Li Yi ran in that direction. The peddler, who was carrying a pole, looked at the crushed fruits on the ground with a painful expression on his face. He said angrily, "Damn it, why are you in such a hurry to reincarnate today?" Li Yi chased all the way out of the street and even out of the city gate. He chased for a long time, but he didn't see Rui. Finally he couldn't run anymore. He stopped on the official road, held a big tree and panted heavily. When Rui pushed him away and ran out, he felt that he was about to lose the most important thing. His heart seemed to be grasped by someone, and it kept clenching and clenching. At that moment she was no longer the fearless leader of Wulin, nor was she the king of mountain bandits. She was just Lu Rui. From the first year of Jinghe to the 4th year of Jingping, they had been walking for a whole 8 years. From Qing and prefecture to the capital, to the Qi kingdom, to the capital, to Shuzhou, to the city of Rui, to the Wu kingdom, and now to the Qi kingdom. Only they knew how much they had experienced. They couldn't be separated for a long time, and they wouldn't be separated. Li Yi leaned against a tree by the side of the road and laughed like a fool. "What are you laughing at?" A voice came from above him. Li Yi raised his head slightly and said, "Come down first." "I can't." Li Yi raised his head even higher and said, "Do you know why girls can't climb trees when they're wearing skirts?" Just as he finished speaking, a figure appeared beside him. Li Yi leaned against the tree and said, "I like to hear you say you like me. Do you want to say it again?" "Why can't you say it?" "I like you." Li Yi looked at her and said, "I like you very much." "I don't like you." "It's useless to say it now." Li Yi laughed happily. Holding his stomach, he said, "I didn't think our Rui would cry. To tell the truth, you look pretty good when you cry. Say it again." "When did you start to like me?" "Didn't I say it earlier? Say it again." "Okay." Li Yi held back his laughter and was about to speak when a voice came from the front. "Your Highness Jiang of Silla, what are you so happy about?" The voice was both familiar and strange. Li Yi looked at the Taoist nun walking toward him and casually raised his hands in a salute. "Taoist Fong, long time no see." The Taoist nun held a horsetail whisk and nodded. "Yes, long time no see. How is the other empress of our holy religion?" Li Yi smiled and said, "Of course she's very good." The Taoist nun looked at him and said, "I wonder if your Highness Jiang of Silla has the time to come with me again?" Mississippi Lu was waiting for him to confess again. Hearing this, she frowned and looked at her. "Get lost." The middle-aged Taoist nun looked at her and put down the horsetail whisk in her hand. Mississippi Lu looked at Li Yi and said, "Wait a moment." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure had already disappeared. At the same time, an extremely sharp sword light appeared in the middle-aged Taoist nun's eyes. One sword. She only used one sword move. The sword light rippled like water and filled the entire space. After a moment, Mississippi Lu came back with autumn water in her arms. "Okay, you can continue now." Li Yi sighed and looked at her. "Will I never be able to catch up to you? Are you going to tell me or not? If not, I'm leaving." Probably the first time we met, from the moment you looked at me on the horse, waved your hand and said, 'Tie me up.'" Mississippi Lu leaned against the tree and hugged autumn water. She said with interest, "Continue, don't stop. Do you remember that time when I bet with you which of the 2 rocks would fall to the ground first? You said it would be the bigger one. At that time I thought, such a silly girl must be very easy to fool. At that time, I didn't know that you weren't silly at all. It took so many years to fool you. Outside of Victory State City, in a simple courtyard in a village." The middle-aged Taoist nun spat out blood again and staggered to open the courtyard door. Seeing this, the 2 people in purple were shocked. They immediately walked forward and said in panic, Lady, what's wrong? Stand guard here. No one is allowed to come in." The middle-aged Taoist nun walked into a room and stopped the 2 people in purple from helping her up. Inside the room, the other 2 people in purple also quickly walked over. The 4 of them looked at each other. In the next moment, 4 sword lights appeared in the small room. "You actually made me the right emissary and gave the token of the left emissary to a completely unrelated person. We're about to conquer the Qi kingdom, but what about you? You made that man surnamed Zhao the emperor. Did you ever consider my feelings when you did this? If you become the emperor, you'll be opposed by the entire Qi kingdom." The middle-aged Taoist nun was silent for a moment and asked, "Don't you want to avenge the Fong family? What do you mean by great enmity? Whoever wants to do it can do it. Fang Yu waved his hand and said, "The Jing kingdom is so powerful. With just us, we won't be able to get our revenge in this lifetime. Isn't it good to be the emperor of the Qi kingdom? Why do we have to go against the Jing kingdom?" The Taoist nun looked at him calmly. After a long while she lowered her eyelids. "You're the last male descendant of the Fang family. Your father entrusted you to me back then so that I could help you complete your great plan of revenge." She shook her head and said, "Even you don't care, so why should I?" After she said that, she couldn't help but cough a few more times. A few more blood-colored flowers appeared on the Taoist robe in front of her chest. She was already seriously injured and she was ambushed by those 4 people just now. Now her injuries were even more serious. She had wanted to stabilize her injuries as quickly as possible and then escape immediately. But now it was all too late. "Don't you dare use my father to pressure me!" Fang Yu roared. "How many years has it been since the incident of the Fang family? Why should I be the one to avenge them? I don't want revenge. I just want to be the emperor. Whoever doesn't let me be the emperor, I'll kill them. Zhao Jing can't do it and neither can you. I've waited for so many years." A look of melancholy appeared on Fang Yu's face. He murmured, "I had placed all my hopes on the king of Shu, but the king of Shu of the Jing kingdom is a complete good-for-nothing. Zhao Jing is also a good-for-nothing, but good-for-nothings are also useful. Zhao Jing, that good-for-nothing, can make me the emperor of the Qi kingdom. I can't miss this opportunity. To hell with holy religion, to hell with vengeance. Can they be more important than being the emperor?" The middle-aged Taoist nun coughed a few more times. This time, the blood at the corner of her mouth was not wiped clean. She looked in a certain direction and said, "You shouldn't have come." Fang Yu looked at her and shook his head. He said, "Aunt, you know that I can't rest easy if I don't see you die with my own eyes." The middle-aged Taoist nun wiped the corner of her mouth with her sleeve again. She looked out of the door and said, "Come in." "Who's there?" Fang Yu's expression changed and he turned around abruptly. Li Yi and Rui walked in from the door. Behind them were Su, Elder Tian and Chang. The middle-aged Taoist nun looked up and said, "I've kept you waiting, haven't I?" Su's expression was extremely gloomy. It was as if the goods he had guarded for many years had been stolen at the most critical moment. More importantly, he could neither blame nor seek revenge on the person who had stolen his goods. Fang Yu's face turned pale. He instinctively wanted to turn and run. Su waved his hand and a white rabbit creamy candy struck his neck. Fang Yu fell to the ground. "Forget it. Since you don't want revenge, then let's not do it." The middle-aged Taoist nun mumbled. "After all, only you can represent the Fang family." After saying this, her entire body seemed to relax. A smile that Li Yi had never seen appeared on her face. She looked at Mississippi Lu and said, 20 years ago, I lost to Lu Qing in one move. 20 years later, I lost to you in one move. Your Lu family, cough cough." Before she could finish, she vomited another mouthful of blood. The front of her Taoist robe was completely dyed red. "This is for you. Spare his life." She looked at Fang Yu and took out a token made of unknown material from her waist. She handed it to Li Yi. Li Yi knew what it was. He reached out and took it. He nodded and said, "Okay." She looked at Mississippi Lu and said weakly, There's something I need your help with." She handed the horsetail whisk to Rui and said, "This horsetail whisk was given to me by him years ago. If there's a chance in the future, please help me stick it in front of his grave. Tell him that Fang Jingyu doesn't owe him anything anymore." Mississippi Lu thought for a moment and took the horsetail whisk. She nodded and said, "I promise you." "Thank you." Taoist nun's expression was no longer as calm as usual. She smiled and quietly leaned against the chair. There was no more sound. Su let out a long sigh and murmured, "It's not enough to kill her. Why did she have to do this?" Li Yi could see that before today, this Taoist nun seemed to be carrying something extremely heavy on her back. Even though she was a grandmaster with top-notch martial arts skills, it was still difficult for her to breathe under the weight of the burden. At that moment, the weight on her body seemed to have completely disappeared. This Taoist nun had kidnapped him and saved him before. Li Yi hated her, but not to the extent that he hated her to the bone. He suddenly felt a sense of sorrow in his heart. He did not know if it was because of the passing of a grandmaster, or because an old friend he had known for a long time had passed away right before his eyes. Mississippi Lu's eyes were also a little red. Li Yi held her waist and let her head rest on his shoulder. He patted her back to comfort her. Then he felt a hard pinch on his waist. There was one less grandmaster in this world. There was a new grave outside Xingzhou City. The coffin was personally made by Su using an old tree in the courtyard. The grave was dug by Chong. He took a shovel and dug for 2 hours without saying a word. Elder Tian helped her wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth and changed her into a clean set of clothes. Mississippi Lu carved a tombstone for her. The words on the tombstone were personally carved by Li Yi. This was probably a kind of mutual appreciation between grandmasters. It had nothing to do with friend or foe. At some point, Li Yi felt that he should not have joined in the fun. After all, he was not even a grandmaster. Unknowingly, he had lowered the status of the four of them. There was only a simple line of words on the tombstone. Tomb of Fang Jinyu. This was a very ordinary grave, so ordinary that it couldn't be any more ordinary. There was no way that anyone would know that a martial arts grandmaster was buried here, as well as the heavenly empress who had hundreds of thousands of followers. Chapter 1144. The Taoist nun who had many grudges with them died. She had a smile on her face when she committed suicide. They had no way of knowing what kind of love and hatred this Taoist nun had with Li Yi's father-in-law, who had passed away a long time ago. However, that was no longer important. The grudge between the Fang family and the royal family of the Jing kingdom had turned into dust with her death. She could no longer see the future of the holy religion that she had built and developed with her own hands. Everything about her life was buried in this small grave. Li Yi held 3 tokens in his hands. One was given to him by the Taoist nun before she died. It represented the supreme position in the holy religion. The other 2 represented the left and right protectors of the holy religion. He already had one, which was the token of the right protector on Fang Yu's body. Holding these 3 tokens in his hands, he held the entire holy religion in his hands. He had promised the Taoist nun that he would spare Fang Yu's life. He would only ask Su to abolish his martial arts. Fang Yu would live an ordinary life from now on, but he would not lack food and clothing. He would live an ordinary life just as the Taoist nun had hoped. When Li Yi and Rui walked back, Fang, who had been looking at the courtyard gate, immediately turned his head. Actually, there was nothing for him to hide. Although he was blind, it wasn't the first or second day that he was blind. Rui wouldn't kill him just because of this reason. To Li Yi's regret, Rui was still not willing to talk to him after he had confessed and kissed her. After they came back, she locked herself in her room. No matter how many times Li Yi knocked on the door, she would not open it. In fact, he still had a lot to say to her, but he also knew how difficult it was for Rui to say those words and take that step. He stepped back and saw Wanru standing in the yard, smiling at him. She looked at Li Yi and asked, "Is she all right?" Li Yi sat down beside her and shook his head slightly. "Don't worry." Wanru looked at him and said, "There are some things that will be fine as long as she thinks it through." Li Yi looked at her. She reached out to hold his hand and said, "Actually, when we were in Fengzhou, I always thought that you were lovers who eloped. When you told me the truth, I thought you were lying to me. But I can see through your eyes. Your eyes can't lie." Li Yi sighed and looked at Rui's tightly shut door, feeling a little worried. She patted Li Yi's hand and said, "You have to believe that you've been together for so many years. No matter what difficulties you encounter, you'll be able to overcome them." Su stood in the distance and sighed. He said, "What's so good about this kid? Why does he meet all the good women in the world? Are you envious?" A voice rang in his ear. "No." Su turned to look at her and said, "You're enough for me." Why should I be envious of him? Although Rui had taken that step, there was still a knot in her heart that was difficult to let go. Li Yi did not want to disturb her, so he took out the 3 tokens again. Before he left, there were still some things that needed to be arranged. King Feng's residence in the capital. A general half knelt in front of Zhao Yi and said, "Your Highness, the Crown Prince's 150,000 soldiers consume a lot of food every day. I'm afraid that the capital region has already been swept clean by them. When they run out of food, I'm afraid that they'll attack the city with all their might. Send another 20% of the soldiers to guard the west gate. Send people out of the city to find out where the reinforcements are. Have people increase the number of patrols at the city gates and reduce the time it takes to change guards by half." Zhao Yi gave a few more orders before he had the time to sit down and drink a cup of tea to moisten his throat. In the last few days, they had not only had to deal with the assault of the 150,000 soldiers outside the city, but also the various undercurrents within the capital. In addition, they also had to deal with Zhao Zheng and the spies of the Holy Church in the capital. If they let down their guard, the spies might even open the city gates and welcome the soldiers into the capital. If they were not careful, one wrong step would lead them into a bottomless abyss. and their reinforcements had encountered countless obstacles on the way and had yet to arrive. Zhao Xiuan's delicate face was now covered in a scraggly beard. He walked up to Zhao Yi and slowly said, "I'm afraid that there will be a fierce battle in the next few days." Yang Yanzhou cleared his throat and said, "At present the entire capital is a soldier, and countless people have volunteered to join the army. The imperial army has always been stronger than the soldiers of the capital. Even if there is a true battle, we might not necessarily lose." After a few moments of silence, Zhao Yi slowly said, "If that's the case, then we can only fight to the death." In the camp outside the capital, Zhao Jing paced back and forth in his tent, an impatient look on his face. He looked at the person behind him and asked, "Where did your protector Fang go? Why hasn't he returned yet?" The person calmly shook his head and said, "The protector's whereabouts are uncertain. We don't know. I don't care where he went. We must attack the city tomorrow." Zhao Jing waved his hand and said, "If we continue to waste time like this, it will do us more harm than good. Zhao Yi and the others are already an arrow at the end of its flight. With a spurt of energy they will definitely be able to take the capital." The person's expression remained calm as he indifferently said, "Without the orders of Her Majesty and the Protector, we will not act rashly." Zhao Jing angrily said, "I am the Crown Prince. I want to order the soldiers of the capital. You dare to disobey?" The person indifferently glanced at him but did not say anything else. Zhao Jing's chest heaved a few times, but his emotions actually calmed down. He strode out of the tent and came to another tent. After sitting down in the tent, his expression was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. If he still did not realize that something was wrong by now, he would be a complete idiot. Fang Yu had unknowingly made him a mere figurehead. Those who controlled the military were mostly people of the holy religion. They listened to Fang Yu's orders more than him. Suddenly, footsteps were heard outside the tent. Someone came in and looked at Zhao Zheng. He waved his hand and said, "Take him down." Several men in blue walked toward him. "What do you want?" Zhao Zheng's expression changed. "What are you doing?" Zhao Zheng wanted to resist, but he could not fight against the two men in blue. With a fierce expression he shouted, "Where is Fang Yu? Get Fang Yu to come out and see me." "Fang Yu can't come to see you." Su Zheng looked at him and waved his hand. "Take him away." More than half of the high-ranking generals of the 150,000 soldiers had been infiltrated by Fang Yu and Taoist Nun. No wonder Fang Yu was so obsessed with the throne of the Qi kingdom. He was only one step away from that position. If not for Zhao Yi's stubborn defense of the capital, the current Qi kingdom would have changed. Several generals who were still loyal to Zhao Zheng were taken down immediately. The rest of the generals were elites of the holy religion. After seeing the three tokens, they immediately surrendered. Of the 8 purple-robed emissaries of the holy religion, 4 were dead and 1 was imprisoned in Victory Province. When they subdued the other 3, they did not encounter much resistance. Changde walked to Li Yi's side and suddenly asked, "What do you plan to do about the Qi kingdom?" Li Yi understood what Chang meant. The 150,000 soldiers in the capital region were all under their control. Taking down the capital would be a piece of cake. What Zhao Zheng and Fang Yu could not do, they could easily do. Of course, taking down the capital did not mean that they would be able to take over the Qi kingdom. After all, they were not the imperial family of Zhao. The Qi kingdom would not be in chaos like the Wu kingdom. After taking over the capital, the Qi kingdom would definitely be in chaos. What they would have to face next might be countless rebels. Li Yi did not want the Qi kingdom. He had no interest in being the emperor in the open or in the dark. In his heart, these things were not as important as seeing Rui smile again. Li Yi thought about it and said, "Let's return the favor." Chang nodded and said no more. The capital. The sky had just brightened when a general rushed into King Feng's residence. Before he saw Zhao Yi, he shouted, Your Highness, they've retreated." You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.